Welcome to the second season of Volgatti. A new donor car, a new paint job, building the interior, finishing all the unfinished work, and much more interesting stuff. Enjoy watching. Before we move on to the second season of Volgatti, let's take a look back at what happened before. 4 years ago, we came up with the idea to combine cars that seemed completely incompatible. An old Volga 21 and a brand new Bugatti Chiron. And so, for 4 years we've been working on this, and it seemed like we finished the project about 6 months ago. We showed the car at some events, even won an award, and made it to top exhibitions.
But this still isn't a finished project, right?
Yes, that's right. The project is still, you could probably keep working on it forever like any other project, but
What exactly do you still want to improve?
the first goal is still to make a custom car that genuinely looks like a factory-made one, in every detail. And that's exactly the goal we have.
And what are you going to do with this project next? Will you be able to register this car in the end?
That's the goal, and in principle, it's achievable. It's very expensive, but I think we'll still manage to legalize it.
And one last question, if I may. Will you change the interior?
Yes, definitely. We haven't worked on the interior yet. That will be a major job, so it will be well thought out philosophically. There will also be elements from both the Volga and Bugatti. That's the next chapter in our story.
In the end, we decided not to stop at what we had achieved and to push the project all the way to perfection. Unfortunately, the donor car that the current build is based on is actually a really bad donor. Basically, it was all we could afford at the time. The thing is, the consequences of the accident are still showing up even now. There are also problems with the engine. And to be honest, it's embarrassing to show off a project like this in its current state. And of course, everything needs to be redone.
As a result, we were faced with the task of transferring this body onto a new donor car. But of course, we're not ready to say goodbye to the project forever. And before we transfer the body, which we've been working on for the past 3 years, we're going to scan it. In fact, we don't really need the scan itself, but since it can be done quickly, we decided not to miss the opportunity. First, we removed all the chrome and left only the main body panels. Next, we stick on the markers. They're needed so the scanner can better understand the surface. After that, we applied a matting spray, and now we can call in the tetroid. As a result, in just half a day we got an accurate scan, which is now archived. But as I mentioned, at this point we don't actually need the scan itself, since we plan to take molds from the existing body. And later, when we have the opportunity and time, we'll make a similar body for ourselves. First of all, to get a proper high-quality mold, we remove all the glass. But in our case, it's just the windshield. The next step is to create a flange and divide the future mold into multiple parts. In simple terms, we need to make a cast of the entire body in such a way that we get a reverse disassemblable mold. Just a little patience and everything will become clear visually. After we've determined the joining points of all the elements, we can start creating the mold.
The first layer is a release agent. Next comes the application of gel. Then, the first layer of fiberglass mat, 100, 300, 450, and 600, were already building up the thickness.
I think we've covered the theory, and now it's time to move on to practice. As you can see, while Andre was telling you about the technology, someone has already applied the first layer. Now we just need to build up the required thickness. This is done in several stages, laying fiberglass mat layer by layer, filling the entire area up to the edges. And the edges themselves will serve as adjoining platforms, at the junctions of which the mold will be separated into individual elements. The same technique will need to be applied to all the body parts. That is, we'll do the same process for the front fenders, doors and trunk lid, create a mold, and then we'll be able to produce identical panels quickly, easily and relatively cheaply. Initially, it took us several years to carefully build the body and bring it to a perfect state. But once we have the mold, making a copy with it will take no more than a week, as we'll soon see for ourselves. Properly making the molds is also not a quick process, and in the end, it took us almost 2 months to roll out all the elements and get the molds ready. But that's not all. After we've obtained the correct molds, ideally, they also need to be reinforced. That's what we'll do next. We make a few small careful cuts in the metal square profile, place it against the mold, bend it gently to fit, and then secure it in place by welding. This way we create something like reinforcement frames.
We carefully molded the entire rear section of the car, which for our specific purposes is taken from the Bugatti. That's the roof, the supporting pillars, the specially modified opening, as well as the rear fenders and the rear bumper. We only welded additional reinforcement onto the rear fender because these particular parts, when the mold is stored for some time in the warehouse, if it's not placed perfectly flat, these areas around the arch can warp or become distorted. Everything else is securely fixed in place with strong reinforcement ribs to ensure stability and durability. And we didn't make any kind of frame for the roof, nor did we fix it in any way because the roof in fact just fits onto the pillars. The only thing we didn't make was the lower part of the bumper, specifically the diffuser. Because of the complexity of these ribs, which are so deep, we made them separately on the car here. We molded each of the parts separately and then carefully glued them on. Another difficulty that we encountered in making this particular part is that it's actually upside down, which is not very convenient to work with. That's why we decided to leave this part for later in the process. Once we remove the mold, we'll detach the rear part of our so-called Bugatti from the car and then flip it upside down to continue working on it. And then, in a position that's comfortable for us, we'll make these parts. We've carefully pried off all the flanges and now we're going to take out the first one right now. Parts of the mold. Everything seems to be pretty good, actually. We used an alcohol-based release agent and on top of that, it's permanent. On the varnish, we can see a thin film of the alcohol-based release agent. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. Visually, it looks as if a very thin layer of cellophane has been gently stuck to the part. It all blows off and then washes away with regular warm soapy water.
Now you'll be able to clearly see the whole idea and essence of the technology. As a result, we've got molds that are separated in such a way that they can be assembled into a single structure. Then fiberglass mat is laid into this structure, impregnated with resin, and in the end, we get the finished Volgatti body. But as you can see, the body itself is not a simple shape. And it was precisely to make it possible to easily remove this large, complex single piece that such a complicated scheme was developed, dividing the molds into a kind of construction set.
When carefully removing the mold, after we had taken out all the individual parts, we ended up with two small cracks right here in this area. This happened because this rear part of the car, right here, is actually glued directly to the BMW body, making it more susceptible to stress. When making part number 4, which was designed to fit precisely between the fender and this air intake, everything was extremely tight and compact here, leaving very little room for error or adjustment. And as I understand it, it pushed out a little. The outer part of the fender, and that's actually where we specifically got cracks. That's why, as I mentioned before, we're going to make all of this as a single, solid piece. Both the fender, the quarter window, and the opening will all be made from fiberglass. And
here it's worth explaining a bit. The thing is, originally we wanted to transfer the entire body onto a new donor, and we made the mold so that in the future we could create one or more additional copies. But during the process, it became clear that it was impossible to do this with high quality, so the plan changed accordingly.
As we worked on the project, our plan gradually changed a bit. Initially, we wanted to carefully take all of this apart, separate the rear part of the Bugatti from the main body of the car itself, and then, with the plastic half of the car flipped upside down, work on it in such a way that we would have better access to mold the lower deflector. But then we thought that we didn't want to damage this rear part, to break it, so we would do everything to preserve this car, to keep it like this, without breaking it. It turns out we shouldn't have removed all the molds that were formed on the car. Now we'll carefully put them back on, assemble them with bolts, and fasten everything together securely. In this position, we'll make the lower part, which is called the rear bumper deflector.
Now all that's left is to make the last mold. It's not very big, but it's definitely the most difficult one. Firstly, because of its shape, and secondly, because of its location. We showed the process of making it in detail quite recently, so we won't repeat ourselves and will quickly speed up this operation. First, we put the molds back onto the body and tighten them with bolts. The next steps are the release agent, gel coat, and then layer by layer of fiberglass mat. And after a couple of days, the required thickness has been achieved. The resin has dried, and we can move on to the next stage. We refine the mold and take it apart. So after 2 months, we have a complete kit for creating a new body. That's exactly what we're going to do now. And now it will become clear why all this was done and how it's supposed to work. The process of making fiberglass parts is more or less the same. It's the same process as making the mold. So let's not repeat ourselves and instead briefly go through all the stages. First, we apply a release agent to the mold, then the first layer of gel coat, which will ultimately become the outer surface. To put it simply, it's something like a primer onto which fiberglass mat is laid and then saturated with polyester resin. But it's important to understand that we need to end up with a single solid body. And as you can see, for now we're only molding separate parts. Just a little more patience and Andrei will explain everything to us.
Since our mold is extremely complex, if you assemble all the components, you get the roof, rear bumper, and fenders. It's very difficult to laminate all of that as a single structure. That is, there will be some hard-to-reach places that are quite difficult to get into or access. That's exactly why we also laminate our part in separate sections. For example, we've molded the rear bumper and we've also molded the rear diffuser as well. So we've made 2 detachable ribs and 1 non-detachable rib. The edge was trimmed along the flanges with a sharp knife. The same goes for the rear bumper, and now we screw these 2 parts together and laminate them, bonding them into a single piece. This is how the entire structure will be assembled. And we end up with a finished, solid part.
While the guys are building up the necessary thickness for the future roof, let me explain the technology and the idea once again. After we obtain the mold, which consists of many parts, we lay fiberglass mat into these parts and saturate them with resin. The next step will be to assemble and glue these parts together.
We continue shaping our roof. For thickness, we used a layer of 100-gram fiberglass mat. Then we sanded it down and checked for bubbles. Next, we covered all of this with 3 layers of 450-gram fiberglass mat. The fiberglass mat has already set as well. We sanded it again, and now the final reinforcement will be done with 500-gram fiberglass cloth. And fiberglass cloth is difficult to roll with a roller. That is, it stretches when it gets soaked, so we cover it with another layer of 450-gram fiberglass mat, and we end up with this kind of sandwich. The roof will turn out very strong and dense, which is exactly what you need for a roof. And that's it. Tomorrow we'll be taking our part out of the mold and it will be ready for installation.
Yes, it all sounds simple and quick. In fact, that's pretty much how it is now, because the molds are well designed and everything comes together like Lego. I really hope it will come apart just as easily. But we'll only find out for sure when the time comes. And so after a couple of days, the long-awaited Our X has arrived. And
we have the long-awaited unboxing. The very first time you remove something from the mold is always a bit nerve-wracking. You worry about whether the release agent worked well, if anything got stuck in there. But we've already unscrewed the mold, so we're taking it off and pulling out the parts.
as you can see, everything worked perfectly, the release agent and the team. And now, this is probably the most illustrative moment. After the molds are removed, it becomes clear how it all works, and it works wonderfully. In just a week we can make an exact, sturdy copy, which is exactly what we set out to prove.
So now we need to very carefully cut off this flange that we made for the mold, because this is the actual part. I can't unscrew it downwards here, it would get stuck. And here this mold is pressing against this flange. We'll cut it off now, and I hope we'll be able to remove it successfully. It's actually a very joyful moment to admire the fruit of your labor. We spent 2 months making the molds. We made molds for the entire car, not just the rear part that includes the hood and the doors, the front fenders, the seals. In other words, all the body panels, everything will be new. The trunk lid as well. As I already mentioned, all of this took 2 months, 2 barrels of resin, I don't know, 5 rolls of fiberglass mat, and a few nerves. We're very satisfied. It's a strong, reliable part. As I said, we reinforced the roof with fiberglass cloth. So the roof is about a centimeter thick, which means it's very strong. You could jump or dance on it, but we won't be doing that, only on the unpainted one. Also, why did we make these molds? Because we had this idea. Why not make a couple of them, maybe introduce and release a limited edition series? And that's what we ended up doing. We spent a lot of time and effort making the molds. And now, it only takes us about 3 days to produce a rear section of the car like this. So, it's really no big deal now.
And finally, before fitting the new body onto the new donor car, we get it ready. We trim it, sand it down, and can check off another very important item on our list. The body is ready. The next step is to prepare the new donor car. It's still the same BMW E63 body, but despite that, the difference between our car and this one is just huge. That's because our example was bought at the bottom of the market in a very badly damaged condition. And to be honest, it still shows to this day. Even though we restored it properly, electrical problems still keep popping up. Ideally, of course, we should replace all the wiring, but that's really not something we want to do. And this car is just in perfect condition. It's a very decent example and the ideal option for a project like this. So what's the idea here? In the end, it became clear that unfortunately Volgatti isn't really needed in our market, and the main issue is that it's either impossible or extremely expensive to legalize it. Right now it's absolutely crucial for the workshop to earn money from our projects because since YouTube doesn't even cover half of our expenses, potentially we have requests to build Volgatti cars to order for countries where they can be legalized. But of course we can't show our early stage prototype to clients, and right now we need to perfect the car, which we plan to do using this donor vehicle as a base. This particular car will be showcased at events and might attract potential customers. We'll definitely show you the entire journey ahead, but for now I suggest we focus on building Volgatti version 2.0.
We already have everything ready for the first fitting. We've made a mock-up, which we're going to try on here. And as you remember, we need to cut off the roof and the rear fenders. It breaks my heart to cut up a car with less than 100,000 kilometers on it. Perfect wheel arches, a flawless body in its original paint. But alas, that's why we hadn't cut it before, even though we could have done it a long time ago.
As much as we don't want to cut up such a perfect donor, we still have to. Of course, it would have been right to build the project right away on a good trouble-free donor, but I guess there's no need to explain why that wasn't done. Obviously it all comes down to money, and at that time we acted based on the circumstances. And here you probably have a logical question. What changed and where did this gorgeous donor come from? Here, one of our subscribers helped us out and agreed to provide a donor which will be turned into Volgatti version 2.0, which will travel to exhibitions, and if we get potential orders, then we'll compensate the cost of the donor. So, to sum up, we're once again working for the idea, hoping to enter a new market. I think this will be an interesting story, which we'll tell in detail on this channel.
The next important step in building our car is actually the very first fitting. We've done a bit of prep work. As you saw, we cut off all the unnecessary parts. But we didn't cut everything off with a big margin, because it's better to trim things on the spot as needed rather than having to weld them back on later. Now we're going to fit it 100%. It won't fit perfectly where it needs to go, but that's intentional.